Chapter 8. A musty breeze washed across Kvar's face, followed by a mist of water droplets, spraying his eyelids, bringing him back to consciousness. His body felt wasted, as though all strength and energy had been depleted. He felt the grit of sand grinding against his face. He cautiously cracked his eye open and took in the surroundings. Directly in front of him stood a rock cone like those in Dreg. As he watched, a drop of water hit the peak and splashed his face again. Kvar slowly turned his head upwards and felt his energy coming back to him. Another cave. He saw that the light source in the cave was the input pad on the gate, emitting a dull orange glow. The numbness receded from his limbs, and he moved them slowly. A quick flex check revealed that all his extremities were still intact. Still not feeling capable of standing, he rolled his head over to look to the left. Kvar's eyes widened upon seeing the Relg stalker lying next to him, its crimson metal armor all scorched and blackened. Wild, lightning-like patterns spread out from the center impact mark of the Krishish wrench. The wrench itself lying between them, stuck in the sand. The Relg stalker laid motionless, contorted on the sand. Kvar reached a hand out for the Krishish wrench, feeling a bit stronger. His arm, shaking, slowly moved into vision and over towards the blade. Then he saw his own skin. The black lightning pattern that spread across the Relg's armor was also etched across his entire arm, zigging and zagging up and around as far as he could see. Frantically, he managed to pull his left arm out from under his body, and was relieved to see it was unmarked. He pulled back his miner's shirt to see that his new tattoo only extended to the right shoulder. He reached again for the Krishish wrench, with less trembling this time, and pulled it out of the sand with great effort. He looked it over for a few seconds, then tucked it into his shirt. Then once again he reached out and grabbed the Relg's staff. He spun it around slowly in his hand, inspecting it, then also tucked it away. Kvar's gaze followed the long and brilliant design of the Gunthian gate, standing resolute before him. It made sense that the gate was in a cave, for they were often built in protected areas. Kvar placed his hands on the ground and tried pushing himself up. On the third try, he was successful in pushing his body onto his knees, raising himself into the air. With one hand, he cupped the sand and let it flow through his fingers. No more running. He looked out before him. Faradon. Sirak territory. He smiled, breathing in the atmosphere around him. Kvar shakily stood up and leaned against part of the gate for support. Besides the dead Relg stalker sprawled on the ground, there was not much else in the sand-filled cave. Experimentally, he held his hand out and allowed his mind to enter into thought. A second later, the symbol on his palm began to glow, and there was a rustling as his boomerang shifted and rose out. He reached down and slowly picked it up. At a snail's pace, he set out towards the other end of the cave. Step after step, he felt strength seep into his muscles, and the pounding headache he had was now starting to fade away. He wondered when the last time he ate or drank was. He heard his stomach growl, and his thirst came back doubled, so he decided to think about something else. As he reached the other side of the cave, he could make out a curved wall, carved out of solid rock. As he got closer, he made out 4 openings, the size of doors. Kvar decided to hobble towards the one on the left. He immediately felt his body being pulled downwards from the strong air current heading into the depths below. Kvar pulled himself to the side of the doorway. "I want up, not down," he grumbled and moved over towards the second doorway. This time there was no air current, and there were no stairs at all. The pathway appeared to be level, without any grade up or down, just straight. He moved over towards the third doorway and peered in. The path through the door was jagged and roughly cut, with the floor dropping out a foot into it. Kvar grabbed the closest rock he could find and pitched it into the blackness. He heard nothing. "Next," he said, moving towards the fourth door. Here he found stairs winding upwards and felt a current of air coming out through the opening. This should be the one, he thought, starting to climb the steps. After a few minutes of climbing, he felt much stronger and was able to walk normally again, although his stomach continually reminded him of the need for sustenance. After a good 15 minutes of climbing, he reached another doorway. Inside, there was a faint, bluish-green glow coming from the moss-covered walls. He heard drips of water splashing into what sounded like a puddle. Thankful for his night eyes, Kvar navigated his way over to a small pool of water, contained within a carved-out rock. Falling to his knees, he brought a handful of cupped water to his lips and drank. As the water rolled and bounced its way down his throat, he felt immediate power return to his body. After he had drank enough to last him for quite a while, he splashed the water over his crusted and dirt-ridden skin. He cleaned up sufficiently and felt refreshed, then resumed climbing. After another tiring 20 minutes, the hallway began to brighten, and he could see the corridor in more detail. The stairs had thick layers of moss growing on top of them, which crept halfway up the walls as well. He saw the end in sight and hurried up to the now level passageway. Catching his breath, he now stared down the hallway, observing a few cracks of light poking in through various holes and gaps between the rocks. He crept over to the largest light source, where he found the tunnel was blocked by large boulders. "Uh-oh," he said, searching for an opening. Peeking through the cracks provided little information and only showed him a brown-tinted sky. After extensive testing, he found a reasonably small boulder wedged in the top, and he decided that it could be pushed out. Kvar positioned his legs on the stone, exerted all his strength, pushing the small boulder. He was rewarded with a tumble of rubble and dust. After a quick bout of choking, he was able to regain control over his lungs and climbed up to the opening. Like a worm, he worked his way through the tight hole, just barely squeezing his shoulders through. As his feet made it past the opening, he propelled himself onto the boulder below and crouched. Carefully, his eyes took in the environment around him. What he read 8 years ago about Faradun being a lush and green planet filled with jungles and all sorts of wondrous plant life had certainly deceived him. Either that or this was not Faradun. Around him, for miles and miles on end, was a blackened, drought-cracked and pockmarked desert. To his left and behind him was a small mountain range, the peaks of which had fallen off and rounded, making them look more like hills. He saw no life anywhere. Kvar turned around in disbelief and began to scurry up a hill to get a better vantage point. He caught a glimpse of the land that lay behind the mountains. The environment was mostly the same, except for a few structures standing out in the middle of an empty plain. There was one large dome, 2 rectangular buildings, and behind them, he thought he could make out the top of what looked to be a spaceship. Kvar, being unfamiliar with spaceships for the most part, couldn't determine the race it belonged to, but he guessed Thirak. "That's probably a good day's hike," he said, beginning to walk towards the encampment. As he walked, he looked up and watched the cotton-white clouds move against the brown skyline. Carefully stepping through the barren wasteland around him, he saw little black silhouettes protruding into the sky, only a few feet off the ground. They were still a ways off, near the camp. As he walked for a few more hours, the mysterious, unmoving, now much taller objects came into view. Kvar walked up to one. It was a yellow vine that went up and over in the shape of an arched doorway. Round, half-purple, half-red bulbs hung off the vine. His stomach scowled at them, so he decided to try one and found them easy to pluck. It was the most tart piece of food he had ever consumed. Apprehensive, he bit into the purple side of the fruit. It wasn't the best thing he had ever ate. In fact, he found that it didn't have much taste at all. But at least it wasn't tart. After a few more bites of the purple side, his stomach demanded more. He ate at least 20 of them in total, feeling a little queasy afterwards. The dome was close now, maybe a 30-minute walk, so Kvar started off again, every few feet reminding himself to find a new pair of boots. Kvar suddenly began to feel the exhaustion of the journey, and he thought his leg muscles had turned to jelly. The massive dome in front of him began to spiral and spin. He reached the outer walls of the building and found them to be made out of a flexible, semi-transparent material. Stumbling along the side of the wall, he found a porthole. After a few misses, he finally latched onto the wheel. He summoned his strength and managed to spin the porthole open. Another wave of dizziness struck Kvar, and he fought off a round of nausea. Slowly and carefully, he slunk into the porthole and pulled himself into the dome. Upon landing on the other side, he was unable to hold off the next bout of nausea. Wiping his lips and face off blindly, he felt the need to close the porthole behind him and reached into the hole and pulled the cap shut. Standing up, he ambled into the bright, green, lush jungle before him, before he tripped on something and fell on a green bush. His eyes flicked back, and he rolled onto the ground and passed out. A beam of light, magnified by the semi-transparent dome material, trickled its way into Kvar's eye. He stirred and finally awoke, feeling damp and something scratching against his leg. He lifted his neck up and saw a green leaf flapping against his knee. Slowly, Kvar propped himself onto his elbow and managed to get up on his feet. The plant was one of many in the dome. The whole inside appeared to be filled with different crops of sorts. He stood up and carefully walked around the plants, stopping at one he recognized, a horn fruit, just like Andresia. "I used to eat these things by the basket," he recalled. He wolfed down a bunch and felt much better. Kvar began moving through the row of plants, fruit, and crops, looking for a door of some kind. The outline of a building could be seen slightly through the dome, and he headed towards it. As he approached, he saw some robo-farmers moving along the tracks, plucking off ripe fruit from the plants and tending to their growth. One almost even hit him, since he was still slightly dazed and not paying the most attention. So this is the lush jungle of Faradon. Finally, he spotted a full-sized door leading into what he suspected was a building behind the dome. He approached it and pulled the huge metal lever, releasing the door lock and swinging it open. Kvar stepped into the empty gray corridor and closed the door behind him. He passed a window and peered in. A conveyor belt from the dome brought in newly sealed and vacuum-packed crates of fruit and crops, each appropriately labeled. He watched as the robot loader moved them from the belt and stacked them on top of another crate. But there was something off here. A few packages had ripped open, scattering fruit all over the ground, which the robots rolled mindlessly over. As he looked closer, the room was nearly full to capacity, and all the pallets had been fully loaded. Kvar left the room and continued down the hall. He reached another door and opened it, slinking into a small room. Still, Kvar saw no signs of intelligent life. The room had shelves, desks, and chains, suspending metal parts and engines in them. He noticed a half-reconstructed robo-farmer on one desk and figured this was a mechanic's room. Kvar approached the half-built drone, running his fingers across it, lifting off a thin layer of dust, which he rubbed between his fingers. "If I had trained under Verasimus, I could have some fun experiments here," he reflected, reaching for the next door. This one was a push. As Kvar pressed on the door, he felt resistance on the other side. He stopped momentarily. Then, hearing nothing, pushed harder, hearing a loud crack as the door opened halfway. Kvar slipped inside, then backed quickly into a wall. Before him lay a large beast with 6 feet. Each paw had 3 heavy-looking claws hanging from them. There was a red-black substance covering the creature's face, where his skin seemed to have been scraped off. Its eyes were gone, and the flesh was rotting. As he moved carefully around it, he noticed a small axe embedded into the creature's spine. The air stank of decaying flesh, and the pungent smell overwhelmed Kvar. But somehow he managed to keep his stomach under control. Along the corridor was a smeared, yellowish-orange substance with an occasional gouge in the wall from the beast's sharp claws. Kvar reached the end of the hallway and found 3 doors. The one in the middle was covered by a massive container that had fallen and blocked the door almost completely, leaving only the top portion exposed. There were scratches on the door as well, but they had failed to pierce through the metal material. Kvar went over to the door on the left and found a locker room, complete with showers and toilets. He quickly ran over to the doorway on the right and peeked into the corridor. Halfway down the hallway, there was a huge hole with the wreckage of an off-roading ranger's vehicle blocking the passageway. Kvar crept to the large gap between the vehicle and the wall and looked outside, but didn't see any movement, just the typical landscape he had seen enough of during the past day's march. Returning to the locker room, Kvar changed out of his ragged miner's uniform and hopped into his first shower in many years. He felt the dirt eke out of his skin and hair, and the warm water soothed his dry, cracked skin. He felt immediately refreshed, and all his strength came back to him. His mind became much clearer, and the ill effects of the purple fruit wore off. He came out of the shower a new man and toweled off, seeing his reflection for the first time in a long while. His long hair was clean and bright white, so much so that it actually seemed to glow on his head. The lines on his face disappeared, and he looked nearer to his true age. He stared at the double-ringed eyes that were unique to his race. Turning around, he decided it was time for some new clothes. He opened the first 3 lockers and found nothing but boots in them. The pair in the second locker were his size, and in excellent condition, so he took those out. He opened the 4th locker and looked in puzzled. Hanging was a white, padded and stitched Federation uniform, one that looked as if it belonged to a branch of the military. What is a Federation uniform doing on a Sirak planet? He said to himself. He found 8 more in the other lockers. A Federation outpost? Oh, don't tell me the Sirak rebels had been defeated, he said, running his hand through his hair. Finding no other clothes, he put on the uniform, boots, and made sure to tuck the Krishish blade inside the uniform. He grabbed his boomerang strap and found a way to jury-rig it to the uniform. It actually worked quite well, and he practiced drawing his weapon a few times. I hope I don't run into any Sirak rebels dressed like this, he said, testing out the new uniform. He had also found a dried military food pouch in one of the lockers and devoured its contents. Kvar returned to the hallway with the rotting beast in it. Never in his life had he seen a creature of the sorts. God, it reeked. Kvar turned towards the door in the middle, blocked off by the container. He bent down and pushed with all his might, but was unable to budge the container. Standing back up, stretching his back, he moved on and walked towards the all-terrain vehicle that was in the other corridor. Kvar inspected the vehicle as he walked by, finding the engine completely destroyed. He ducked under a broken beam and went outside. There, he saw another little building off to his right and a decent-sized cargo ship parked nearby. A Federation cargo ship. Kvar approached it, looking for an entrance. He had no idea how to fly one of these or how they functioned, for he had never been educated in such matters. He had found the gate system to be a much more effective means of travel. The disadvantage, however, was that most civilized, and especially Federation planets, had built up defenses around the gates. They were nothing but traps, waiting for the unlucky Drazian or fugitive to walk through. Finally, he located the control panel for the ship's gangway. He tapped the pad and it lit up, awaiting input. He tried a few commands, but was constantly returned an access card required message. Fuck, said Kvar. All right, let's go find that card. The door to the second building opened easily, and he walked into a dark room. This building had no windows or outside light coming in. He found the controls on the wall, and was pleasantly surprised to see that the light still worked. He was in some sort of galley, with 3 tables sprawled out and a small kitchen along the far side of the wall. There was a door to his right that he walked to and opened. There were stairs descending into the ground. Kvar took them down to the lower floor and found the light controls again. This room was filled with monitors and displays. He saw scripts scrolling and blinking on a few of the screens. Lights were flashing, and Kvar got the feeling that they weren't supposed to be doing that. He approached one of the screens and studied it for a while. It was a route plan and a cargo manifest for the ship outside, the Alaron. It was due to deliver its cargo, fruit resupply, to a ship called James Relowick, a name Kvar was familiar with. Jim the Red, a founding member of the original Federation, famous for uniting the Kinar and Intreg systems. He compared the expected date of the Aileron's departure to the current date and found that it was due to depart in 3 days. I guess that explains why they haven't sent anyone to check out the station, he muttered to himself. The next monitor was a communications log. The newest communication was a failure to send message. Kvar selected that one and opened it up. It was a simple mayday with no message. It was sent 6 weeks ago. There was an alert scrolling across the top of the monitor that stated the communication relay servers were unable to be reached. He got up and scoured the entire room for an access card, with no luck. "Shit! Where is it?" he said. Kvar double-checked the galley, and after finding nothing, he went back to the locker room and checked the pockets on each uniform, hoping to find the key, but came up with a big handful of nothing. He turned towards the blocked room. Kvar sighed. He ripped off a locker door and wedged it between the wall and the container. The door looked like one of those big freezer doors made out of thick, galvanized metal. He pulled with all his weight. The locker door bent like a banana. Damn it! He hopped off the container and looked for a lever or strong metal bar. He thought about dislodging the busted wall beam, but thought that might be just as hard. He withdrew the crisis wrench from inside his uniform. Almost like a pry bar, he said, wedging it in. He pushed and pulled and came up with nothing but a sore back. What the fuck's inside this thing? He said, staring at the container. Then he sighed with disappointment. He punctured 3 holes into the container and stepped back as water gushed out onto the floor. 5 minutes later, the big red container easily slid out of the way and unblocked the door. The Drazian grabbed the door's handle and pulled it open. The smell that oozed out was far worse than the rotting monster behind him and caused Kvar to gag. With watering eyes, he turned back to look inside. Littered about the ground were bits and pieces of plastic and wood crates. He was right. This was a refrigerating room, with green metal shelves all over. There were piles of feces scattered about the floor, and the strong smell of urine leaked from the room. The cooling unit was broken, and an inch or so of liquid was stagnating on the floor. There were 5 or 6 crumpled up, wet and blood-soaked uniforms, the same kind Kvar was wearing now. In the corner of the room was a heap of bones and bits of muscle tissue. Untouched heads could be seen protruding from the mound, their skin ending at the bone from the neck down. A black box lay on the shelf near the back. He entered the room and approached it, recognizing the double F symbol on the suitcase. Federation Fleet, he muttered to himself. There's my access card. There was a splash behind him as 2 feet landed on the wet floor. The Drazian spun around to face a woman. The clothing that still remained on her was covered in dry blood. Despite her matted and wild hair and filth-covered skin, she was beautiful. Oh, thank God, she began, her voice weak and thin. You finally arrived. The Relth got into our camp and went wild. We had to... She stopped as she saw Kvar's eyes. Drazian, she whispered in awe. What are you... How did you... She stammered, confused. Kvar put up his hand. Can you fly that ship out there? He asked. She paused for a moment, remembering, before finally shaking her head. No, the captain, she started. Then her eyes drew to the massive bones in the corner. She didn't make it. The Drazian nodded and grabbed the suitcase. He motioned her out of the refrigerated room and led her into the galley. He took a sackcloth and began filling it with food and bottled drinks. Come, Kvar motioned. Stopping by a locker, he grabbed a uniform and shoved it in the nearly full sack. He grabbed some tool from the mechanic's crate and slipped it into his belt. What are you doing? She asked, her voice a bit stronger now, after a glass of water. Kvar just looked at her and smiled slightly. He led her into the captain's quarters and opened a door. Inside was a spacious private bathroom with all the amenities and luxuries afforded to one of such rank. The Drazian gestured for the woman to go inside. The woman's eyes went wide. From one present into the next, she asked, breathing anxiously. Kvar shrugged. You have to admit, this one is a little better. I need some time to get away safely. Your alternative is death. The Drazian pulled out the tool and handed it to her. Take a shower, get cleaned up, have a good meal and a night's rest. Then use this to take apart the door frame. Shouldn't take more than a day. The woman thought it over for a couple seconds, then took the food sack and went inside. What about you? She asked. I'd better be long gone by then. If you have any decency and interest in preserving a nearly extinct race, then leave out the part of my being here. I never agreed with it. It was genocide, she said. Kvar turned to face her, narrowing his eyebrows. I just wanted you to know, she continued, we're not all evil in the Federation. It was a select few who brought upon that war. War? War implies there were two sides fight. Kvar stopped as he took a breath and relaxed. The only people I blame are my own. They lost the ability to adapt and degenerated into, what's the use? I'm preaching when I should be moving. The Drazian took a breath and cast a final look at the woman. One piece of advice. Don't get caught up on history. Care only about your future. You did what you had to. Kvar looked on solemnly for a few seconds. Best of luck to you, lady, he said as he pulled the door shut. Wait, don't you at least want to know my name? Her voice cut off, muffled as a heavy door closed. Kvar locked it. He grabbed the fleet suitcase and walked down the hallway toward the landing pad. As he stepped through the damaged wall and into the dry, gloomy landscape, he took one last look at the carnage and smiled.